Good morning. So, a lot of you have been here before. I actually want to do exactly the same, like people who were here like 5 times should stand up, but we already did that, so I'm going to skip that part. For those people who don't know me, I'm Chris, I'm from Belgium. 20 years ago, I started my career as a software developer. I used to say in all kinds of crappy languages and then realizing half of the audience was still using them, Perl, PHP, stuff like that. And then I became an ops guy. And lots of you folks know me from my blog, which says everything's a fucking DNS problem. And I tried to hunt down what happened with systemd tonight, but I couldn't find the details. But apparently, again, there is one. And what I've been doing for the past 7 to 8 years is help people organize events like this and evangelize DevOps. And for me, it all started here. Who knows where this is? Who knows where this is? It's not in Ghent. Toshaan, where is this? It's in Antwerp. Where specifically? It's the Antwerp Zoo, where back in 2007 we had a cloud camp, and I met Patrick. And we started talking, and we figured out, like, hey, so we meet the same people at the same conferences, or different conferences even. And there's operations conferences where we talk, and there's developers conferences where we talk. But there's no place where both those folks meet, where we have developers and operations people meeting. So we got the crazy idea to start a small conference. We didn't have a name for it. That was a couple of months later when this talk happened at Velocity. And a bunch of us were in Europe looking at the live streams, and Patrick got the name. Paul Nazareth got involved. A couple of other people got involved. And what happened was somewhere in October, we had a small conference with, you can count the number of people, they're still listed on the website somewhere, with like 60, 70 of our best friends talking about how we deliver software, how we do agile, how we do cloud. And if you look at the background of those people, it was a mix of people who did open source, a mix of people who did agile, and some cloudy stuff. And a lot of people forget that. That's where we come from. People with 10 to 15 years of experience in these kinds of fields, helping people to deliver software. That's where we started. So we had a conference, same format as this one, opening talks in the morning, open spaces in the afternoon, people explaining to each other what problems they ran into, what topics they dealt with. But who actually was in Ghent besides me? Is nobody in Ghent? I see Gerard pointing somewhere, but is Henk here? No, Henk isn't here. So John Willis came there. A couple of other people came there, and we came up with the idea to do this on the other side of the ocean. They took this to Mountain View, and there we had the first DevOps days in the States. In the first couple of years, it was one in Europe, one in the States, and then some more happened. So we had Sydney, we had Hamburg, we had Sao Paulo, and one in Europe. So it was Hamburg, Göteborg, Rome. And then 2013 was kind of a tipping point. There we had London twice, we had Paris, and we had Amsterdam for the very first time. And just like Ghent started out by accident, Amsterdam also started out in a weird way. I think the seeds were planted somewhere April 2012, maybe a bit earlier, when... Is Arjen here? No, I don't see Arjen Eriks. No, the other. Well, Schubert Phil has invited me and John Alspal to talk about what we were doing with DevOps at an event at their office. And that's where we got to know each other, and we figured out, hey, what about we do something in Amsterdam? I took Arjen, sitting right here, to Rome. A couple of other people joined. The other Arjen Wolfs told me yesterday that a bunch of them also went to London. So they kind of got the experience on how does this DevOps Days thing happen. Next to that, we had ING who started their journey into doing something which might eventually look like DevOps. And that's why I started spending a lot of time in Amsterdam. Went a bunch of times to the DevOps meetup, which was started. Where's Alessandro? Where is everybody? I mean, nobody's coming here. Alessandro, when you see him, we still need his Ignite slides for today. So please pass on that message. So a bunch of us went to Rome. And, well, this guy was there also, Keith. And one thing led to another, and we started planning DevOps Days Amsterdam with a lot of people who are still involved in organizing this event here. But there was a small thingy next to it. The ING crowd had the idea to also run their own internal DevOps Days. So we got John Willis and Damon Edwards and Keith over to run an exact same format inside a company. And that was the start of the day before DevOps Days Amsterdam. I think, no, Michael, you were there the year after, right? The second year. So this is what DevOps Days 2013 looked like. We had a talk about the Big Lebowski. We had a talk about putting the S in DevOps, S as security. We had a talk about Failcake, which was also happening in, which was also a talk we had in London. And then we had the goat incident. Who still remembers the goat incident? There is a bunch of people who remember the goat incident. And we had John and Damon, who were also here, telling us about what happened. And the goat incident is not the only thing that happened. There was also the coffee incident, which kind of had a bunch of stains right over here, but that's not the most important part. So that was 2013. It feels much longer ago than it is. But so 2014, we had Mark Hinkle, we had Jeffrey Snover talking about desired state configuration, we had Bol.com talking, and we actually had ING on stage. Mark, no. Jan Joost, no. Nobody's showing up. And we had the goat again. So yesterday evening, we figured out we were in a silo, and we wondered how far the goat could go if we would tie it to the silo of the social event. And I think it just would probably reach the Verkeerde Zuster, which is like a pub in Amsterdam where we end up a lot of times. But this was a talk which started to happen in Amsterdam, which then started to get its own life. And we keep seeing it again. There's a trend here. There's a couple of other trends which we'll come down to. So 2015 was another year. This time, we had the real dude. The pictures here, the decor has changed a bit. The couch is the same. We don't have everything in place anymore. I think some things broke along the journey, but that's what happens in Amsterdam. We had more talks about animals, about unicorns, about donkeys, about horses, about... Michael Code gave a talk about it's not just unicorns, it's all kinds of companies that are doing this DevOps thing now. And we had a talk about microservices by Adrian Cockcroft. That's already 3 years. It's fast. So 2016, we had a new team. Some folks finally figured out that there's a lot of Lego geeks in here, and they all gave us minifigs. And everything was awesome. And then there was a funny thing where I actually walk into WCAMP the day after they have an extremely funny experience, and I tell them, hey, you should submit this as a talk, and they do. And that's how you get talks at conferences, which are really interesting. And we had Adam Jacob talking about his new vision on how to deliver software. So that's 4 years of DevOps Days. What kind of trends have you seen by now? Anybody? Animals. Yeah, there's unicorns, goats, donkeys, horses. I mean, I think I once told Michael that the next part of that talk, the next part of the series should be about the Bremer musicians. I mean, there's pretty much everything in there, but never materialized. And even yesterday evening, when we were having a speaker's dinner, on the ceiling of the building, there was a goat. Like, it has to be destiny, right? So there's more trends. Anybody?
The speakers mysteriously disappear?
speakers mysteriously disappear. Yeah, maybe. Has everybody been accounted for today? No, not yet. No, there's something with the names of the speakers. If you look at the majority of speakers, they're actually called Mark, depending on the variation, Michael, or they have some kind of Jeffrey in their name. I mean, I could only conclude one thing, and that is next year the keynote is going to be this guy. Or this guy. Funny thing is I actually know them. So. But there's another thing. There's apparently DevOps Days Amsterdam has been taking part in a bunch of hidden contests. The first one is the ugly T-shirt contest. I mean, DevOps Days Amsterdam has been definitely the first 2 years the only T-shirt I could not wear to customers. It's been improving now, but it's still not as good as it should be. And when they do a good thing, then they manage to get the organizers all red shirts. Luckily, they didn't die. And this year, well, they couldn't even match the colors of the organizer T-shirts. Something is happening there, but they're improving. This year's shirt actually looks the best so far. And then there's another contest they're trying to win. I mean, this one already says they scored less points than Ghent, which is kind of trivial, but when they start to do the other contest, they try to get beers. You know, I'm Belgium, and we ran out of Duvel at 8 o'clock yesterday, which is why I'm completely sober now. But 2014, 15, or 13, 14, guys, don't bother. I mean, there's people in the audience who realize what the best beer in the world is. Actually give it to me as a present. Thank you, Michael. That's Westvleteren, by the way. So, 4 years, this is the 5th year. What did we learn? We learned a lot of things. We learned that a lot of new people showed up because this DevOps thing is finally getting mainstream, so we think. We see that a bunch of old schoolers don't show up anymore because, well, the topics are the same. We kind of get some diversion, but we're reiterating over a bunch of things. I can actually predict what open spaces are going to happen today. I've been having that for the past 4 to 5 events. I can predict there's going to be one about organizing your own DevOps days. Docker. Container orchestration. Infrastructure as code, monitoring metrics, and selling it to your manager. Systemd maybe, yeah. And we're hungry for new topics. And we learned something else. There's people who actually come here to learn Dutch. Jason, where are you? Right there. How many years do you come here to learn Dutch? When are you moving over?
I've been learning Dutch for 3 years.
You've been learning Dutch for 3 years. So here's the pro tip. Don't move to the Netherlands, move to Belgium. Better beer, better chocolate, you know. And that's where all the great conferences start. But there's also an evolution in topics. If you looked at the very first years, when we were talking about culture, we were talking about agile, about how people could combine Kanban and Lean and all those things. And there was a lot of startups that were talking about their experiences. We had the Spotifys, we had the unicorns. People were looking at the startups and ecosystem around that as where DevOps was happening. Whereas the roots where we came from, specifically Patrick and I, we were coming from the enterprise. Patrick was working for a government institution. I was working for a large telco equipment manufacturer. And there was nothing startup-y around those things. So it was kind of a mismatch about what people expected and what was happening. And now we see that topic evolve through, well, Agile is dead, or, well, I've seen so many Agile implementations that have completely failed. People have now reinvented Agile and they call it safe, they call it waterfall, they call it watermill, and they think they're Agile. And we get that kind of thing. We get enterprise DevOps. And people start to figure out what's different between DevOps and enterprise DevOps. It's nothing different, it's a scale. We have discussions on how do we engage management, how do we get management to do this, whereas 5 years ago, or 7 years ago, that was the default. We didn't have to convince our management because we were already doing this and we were exchanging experiences. And now it's, how do we sell this? How do we get people to introduce that change? And because of we need to sell it, because of that experience, we also need to talk about burnout, about why isn't it working? Why are we getting frustrated? And what's happening there? So there's been a huge evolution in topics, not only on the culture part, but also on the automation part. 7 years ago, we were talking about CF Engine, Chef Puppet, and that was mainly the part where we did infrastructure as code. Today, when we talk to people doing infrastructure as code, they just translate Bash to YAML. Something went wrong there. I don't know what, but back then we were talking about tools like mCollective and Noah and Runback, and some of those tools are still around, some of them are now in the new generation. Same with continuous integration. We used to have manual rewritten scripts, Hudson and Jenkins, and now there's a lot of evolution happening and a lot of new tools popping up. And where 10 years ago we were clicking around in user interfaces, now we're doing actually pipeline as code. On the cloud infrastructure, I mean, I also always want to ask in Europe, who's running on a public cloud? I see like maybe 20% of hands shown up. If you get the same question in the States, there's like 20% of hands not showing, and those are the people asleep. There's a huge difference in public and private cloud adoption between what's happening in the States and what's happening here. So in Europe, we had a lot of discussion about how to build a private cloud, how to run these things. In the States, we never had those. So there's differences also. And now we see that a lot of people are not talking about OpenStack anymore, or CloudStack, because it's there. Other parts which evolved was the automation part. 10 years ago, we were discussing Zen, KVM, OpenVZ, and that kind of things. And today, it's just like, come on, Michael. Oh, yeah. Docker, Docker, Docker. Rocket. We had Mitchell introduce us to Vagrant, and it was like the awesome tool where we could do everything with it. And then Docker came. And we were like, this is Vagrant LXC, what's new? But a bunch of new people went like, Docker, Docker, Docker. And we don't get the hype. A lot of people don't get the hype around it. We discussed orchestration frameworks, the old ones, Linux HA, CoroSync, and the new ones. But we haven't solved the real problem yet. We haven't solved the problem, how do we access our services? We haven't solved the problem, how do we access our data? It really, really saddens me when you go into a discussion about how are we going to deploy Kubernetes and how are we going to solve the storage part, and the answer is not Ceph or Gluster, but it's NFS. Because I think I banned NFS in my infrastructure about 15 years ago. But the new cool kids on the block think NFS is the new big thing. So CI evolved, testing evolved. There's good things happening, though. We moved from discussing testing tools, generally purposed, to discussing security testing. How are we going to improve security? Because that's definitely more important these days. And we've kind of converged to only one configuration version source control tool. Most of the things we do today is Git, Git, Git. So that's good. But we still have not solved release management, except if you really know how to use Git. Did somebody see the trend in these slides? I started talking about the culture part, moved to the automation part. So what's the next part? Who's awake? Monitoring has evolved. 7 to 8 years ago, we were talking about Nagios. I know I'm cursing now because I'm in Europe, and Bernd is probably going to kill me now, but we were talking about how monitoring sucked. Cacti, Munin, RRD, Xenosabbix, all big fat things that didn't work. And these days, we're happy users of other tools. We have embraced Elasticsearch, Logstash, Grafana, Kibana, and then when we're moving to container space, we're playing around with Prometheus and that kind of things. And We moved from monitoring sucks to monitoring love. And in a way that was because of automation. But there's one thing which we still have not fixed. And that's a lot of culture. We've introduced a lot of tools, and a lot of people think tools will help you. But introducing Docker, or introducing Kubernetes, or introducing OpenStack will not fix your broken culture. And that's something which we are still learning. There's way too many people that think that if we go to microservices, everything is going to be solved. And it's not. So we need to understand that the tooling hype is not what DevOps is about. It really is about collaboration. It's about going back to our roots and collaborating that the business had a better platform to build their software on. It's going back to using open source. It's going back to common sense and empathy for the people we work with. And kind of, we had people talk about a full stack engineer. So who's a full stack engineer? Okay, so I see a couple of hands. Who has been working in kernel space recently? Or even over the course of their whole career? Keep your hands raised. Kernel space going all the way up over operating system to middleware to the front end. That's like, including myself, 4 people, 5 people were basically full stack engineers. The rest of them have no clue what a full stack is. That's what we got to. People tell themselves, I'm a DevOps engineer. I'm a full stack engineer. I think it's time we promote a new thing. I think it's time we stop looking at the hype and we stop looking at the new fancy tools and we start thinking about what really is important, which is helping the business forward. Helping the business to grow, to be profitable, and to be operational. And that means we need to invest in knowing what we run. I think we need to become dual stack engineers, like a really stable stack, whether it's Chef or CF Engine or Puppet-based or Docker-based. And we need to invest in the people that know how that stack is run. And we need to invest in working with coworkers, because we're there for the business and not for learning the new next fancy tool. And Ivo got around with creating a logo for the dual stack engineer. It's actually taking on. He's really happy. By the way, that's Ducci's feet. So we need to get back to that point where we learn how to understand the stack and stop playing with fancy tools just for the fun of it. So what does the future bring us? DevOps Days is here to stay. In total, we've had 175 events so far worldwide. If you look on the global Slack channel, there's more than 400 people in the organizers room talking about how to run a DevOps Days. There's a lot of other events popping up that have their own DevOps track. So DevOps Days is growing. There's room to do this in every single city. And if you want to start one yourself, the core organization, where I'm part of, Bernd is part of, there's a couple of other people here, we help you to run these DevOps Days. The first thing you probably do is basically start a local meetup group, start a community in your city, and then reach out to us and say, hey, I want to run a DevOps Days. We'll help you find a team. You need to find a venue. We can help you find coaches and sponsors. And obviously, there will be an open space about that today. For those interested in speaking at other DevOps Days, these are the ones that still have open call for papers within travel distance. There's a bunch of other ones in the States also. And they're still looking for speakers and sponsors. And with that, I guess my 20 minutes are getting close to up, so I want you to enjoy DevOps Days Amsterdam.
Thank you, Chris. I have a speaker present for you, which is a speaker, because you're a speaker. So you get a speaker.
So now there's 2 speakers.
Yeah, indeed. A small one and a slightly larger one. So does anyone have any questions for Chris? Because I really want to throw this thing to someone. Okay. Well, thank you, Chris. That'll be it for today. Until later.
Until later.